There we are. Well, good morning, beloved. Thank you for joining us once again in Sunday Fellowship. We're excited to have you join us this morning. If you are joining us on YouTube, of course, this is not good morning to you. It's whatever time you're looking at this is where you are. But we had a wonderful time last week. I was here. I was sitting in the audience, hearing Brother Curtis share with you what the Father gave to him on death of identity. Of course, as always, as we talked this past week, he and I and Jim had lunch together, and you always see stuff that you didn't say that you wanted to say and that was revealed after you said it, right, Curtis? Yeah. So anyway, we're going to continue with the message the Father gave us on evolution, eschatology, and the rapture. I'm swallowing a lot. I'm kind of like Curtis now. I'm sounding like Curtis. I don't have a bottle of water here to say, let me take a water break. So I'm swallowing. I was eating before we started, and Jim fired this thing up, and I was unable to clear my throat. But anyway, 2 Sundays ago, we started on a message about evolution, and doing that. I'm not going to rehearse that again because I have too much on eschatology today to go back. So I'm going to pull a Curtis on and say, you need to go back and look at the previous message on lesson one on this message on evolution. There's a lot of good information there. There's a lot of good things that the Spirit would definitely teach you, that the Father is the originator of evolution. He is the originator. It's been hijacked by Satan through man-made religion, but it was his idea. So anything God does, Curtis says, Satan always wants to imitate. And I say Curtis said that we've probably both been saying that for a while, but he tries to imitate everything the Father does. He is a reproducer of false identity. The Father is the originator of identity. He's the producer of false identity. So anyway, this week, we are going to look at the second part. Last time it was evolution. This time it's eschatology. So with no further ado, Curtis, you going to read or should I? Okay, well, if you want to start, it'd be great.
The process of sonship and the power of evolution, eschatology, and the rapture, caught up with David Kenebrew.
Oh, gosh.
In 1 Corinthians 2:14, we read, "But the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him. Neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned." Eschatology, the definition, a branch of theology concerned with the final events in the history of the world or of humankind. A belief concerning death, the end of the world, or the ultimate destiny of humankind, specifically any of various Christian doctrines concerning the second coming, the resurrection of the dead, or the last judgment.
Okay, let's pause. leave the definition up there. Now, here's where men have taken this idea on eschatology and moved it from something God gave. You see right there where it says, various Christian doctrine concerning the second coming, the resurrection of the dead, and the last judgment. Two of those are close to being correct. One is not, and that is, well, no, I won't say that. The second coming of Christ, the resurrection of the dead, and the last judgment are all part of the same idea. The problem in that is they're missing something in that idea that's spiritual. So, but I'll get that when we get to talking about this in a few minutes. So let's move on. I want to start off with the book of Daniel. You want to read that, please, Kurt?
The book of Daniel will lead off our look into the end of the end time review. There are several chapters in the book of Daniel in which he is given 4 visions and prophecies. They are covered in chapters 7 through 12.
Now, you don't have to, you just leave it there for a minute. Oh, okay, thank you, Jim. Now, we're going to take a quick look at these chapters. This is just a condensed explanation of these chapters. Chapter 7, chapter 8, chapter 9 is, we only have about less than a paragraph on some of them. But I want you to read so you'll understand how we get to Daniel's 70 weeks, and I think that's in chapter 9. But I want to let you see where most people in the church use these verses to, how do I say it? They use these verses to attach to the idea of the rapture and the resurrection. So, first let me say going in, before Curtis starts to read this, Daniel is a prophet to who? Israel. Daniel is a prophet to Israel. The book of Daniel has nothing, zero to do with the church. Again, Daniel is not for the church. And you're going to read that in a few of these verses that Curtis is going to so kindly to review for us. But I want to let you know again, Daniel has nothing to do with the body of Christ. The end time things that Daniel is going to reveal to us and Daniel is going to say is strictly to one people group. And we'll get to that in just a second because we need to see what the Father is saying to us as sons. This is something he's doing to fulfill a promise he made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay, let's go on, Curtis. Thank you.
The vision of the beast from the sea, chapter 7. In the first year of Belshazzar, Daniel has a dream of 4 monstrous beasts arising from the sea. The fourth, a beast with 10 horns, devours the whole earth, treading it down and crushing it. And a further small horn appears and uproots 3 of the earlier horns.
Now pause. Just one quick second. Don't, Jim, just leave it there. The 10 horns is going to be seen in Revelations. Okay? But we'll get to that I just want to mention that. When we get to, you're going to read this again because I put it in our topic later on in the lesson, in the message on Revelations. Please continue.
The Ancient of Days judges and destroys the beast, and the one like a son of man is given everlasting kingship over the entire world. A divine being explains that the 4 beasts represent 4 kings, but that the holy ones of the Most High would receive the everlasting kingdom. The 4th beast would be a 4th kingdom with 10 kings, and another king who would pull down 3 kings and make war on the holy ones for a time, 2 times and a half, after which the heavenly judgment will be made against him, and the holy ones will receive the everlasting kingdom. Vision of the ram and goat, chapter 8. In the 3rd year of Belshazzar, Daniel has a vision of a ram and a goat. The ram has 2 mighty horns, one longer than the other, and it charges west, north, and south, overpowering all other beasts. A goat with a single horn appears from the west and destroys the ram. The goat becomes very powerful until the horn breaks off and is replaced by 4 lesser horns. A small horn that grows very large. It stops the daily temple sacrifices and desecrates the sanctuary for 2,300 evening and mornings, which could be either 1,150 or 2,300 days, until the temple is cleansed. The angel Gabriel informs him that the ram represents the Medes and the Persians, the goat is Greece, and the little horn is a wicked king. Vision of the 70 weeks, chapter 9. In the first year of Darius the Mede, Daniel meditates on the word of Jeremiah.
Hang on. Daniel and Jeremiah was at the same time. Sorry about that. Daniel and Jeremiah was at the same time of the captivity, the Babylonian captivity. Right, Curtis? You know that. So the reason Daniel was meditating on Jeremiah, because Jeremiah had written his prophecy to Israel. So that's what Daniel was reading or meditating on when he had this vision, okay? They were at the same time.
In the first year of Darius the Mede, Daniel meditates on the word of Jeremiah, that the desolation of Jerusalem would last 70 years. He confesses the sin of Israel and pleads for God to restore Israel and the desolated sanctuary of the temple. The angel Gabriel explains that the 70 years stand for 70 weeks of years, 490 years, during which the temple will first be restored, then later defiled by a prince who is to come, until the decreed end is poured out. The message from Gabriel outlines the prophetic future of Israel in terms of 70 weeks, which refers here to 70 time periods of 7 years each, or a total of 490 prophetic years. Gabriel's words give startling insight into specific prophetic events, some of which have since been fulfilled with literal precision, and others of which are still yet to come, providing the framework for the end of times.
Okay, pause for just 1 minute. Now, again, we're not reading the verses per se, but we're giving a synopsis of what those verses are saying or interpretation. When he says some of these things have been fulfilled with precision, that's absolutely correct. Now, keep in mind what's happening before us. These things are happening based on what God is doing with Israel. So when they happen with precision, it has to do with things going on the earth. For the people of Israel, God made a promise to this people from Genesis chapter 3. So he is in the process of fulfilling these things for us, for them today. So please continue, Curtis.
Vision of the kings of the north and south, chapters 10 through 12. Daniel 10. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, Daniel sees in his vision an angel called a man, but clearly a supernatural being, who explains that he is in the midst of a war with the prince of Persia,
Which is the devil. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
assisted only by Michael, your prince. The prince of Greece will shortly come, but first he will reveal what will happen to Daniel's people. Daniel 11. A future king of Persia will make war on the king of Greece. A mighty king will arise and wield power until his empire is broken up and given to others. And finally, the king of the south, identified in verse 8 as Egypt, will go to war with the king of the north. After many battles described in great detail, a contemptible person will become king of the north. This king will invade the south 2 times. The first time with success, but on the second time he will be stopped by the ship of Kittim. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
He will turn back to his own country, and on the way his soldiers will desecrate the temple, abolish the daily sacrifice, and set up the abomination of desolation. He will defeat and subjugate Libya and Egypt, but reports from the east and north will alarm him, and he will meet his end between the sea and holy mountain. Daniel 12. At this time Michael will come. It will be a time of great distress, but all those whose names are written will be delivered. Multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. In the final verses, the remaining time to the end is revealed. A time, times, and half a time. 3 years and a half. Daniel fails to understand and asks again what will happen, and is told. From the time that the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination that causes desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. Blessed is the one who waits for and reaches the end of the 1,335 days.
Okay, let's discuss that for a bit before we move on. That's a lot of, I notice a lot of information. If you, those of you who are with us and you get the notes, you can take a look at it and sit down and go over these notes if you'd like. My encouragement to you is don't waste a lot of time, but I know some of you like that kind of stuff. It's kind of like reading a mystery novel, and you like to try to figure out who did what. So, have fun with it. But that is a, how do I say this nicely? That's another trick of the devil. I mean, it's okay, but it's not time well spent. Right, neither is watch. I'd rather watch good TV. I'd rather watch a good TV show than to spend time reading something that ultimately gives me an idea of not what the Father is doing with me as a son. So that's the crux of a lot of the things. Some of these things we will look at when we get to the book of Revelations, because we're going to discuss that because that's part of eschatology. So all of these things that Curtis was kind enough to read, dealing with Daniel and his visions for the last days, for the last times, deal with Israel. None of that has, because it says Daniel's people. It said Daniel's people. There's a couple other things it said, but we'll get to that when we get to the book of Revelation. It says Daniel's people. That's not us. That's not you and me. That's not the birth sons of God. He talked about several other different things, but I won't go into those things right now because I want to press on. So let's look at the next level. One of the things that we need to look at that people get confused by, and it's just things we've been taught over the years. But in the process of sonship, the Father, I trust, is setting some of you free from the idea that you and Israel have something in common, other than you have the same God. So we don't really need to look at a lot of what God's saying to Daniel. But anyway, again, please, if you're into that kind of stuff, what it's going to do is add to your confusion. I remember one time I was teaching, and a dear sister came up to me, and she said, the preacher, I taught in his church, and he came up to me after the message, and he said to me, brother, the people are confused by what you said. And I said, brother, I said nothing that was confusing. He said, well, you said, he gave me what I said. I said, no, I didn't say that. What I said was, you can't undo conception. So he said to me, well, people are confused, and the Bible says, and they always quote this verse. This is the verse they quote. God is not the author of confusion. In 1 Corinthians, I think it's 1 Corinthians chapter 14. God is not the author of confusion. I said, no, brother, you're right. He is not. They were confused before I got here. I only added light to their confusion. I brought light to their confusion. So when you're reading Daniel, you will continue being confused about the difference between you and Israel, because everybody wants to figure, fear runs this thing. So everybody wants to try to figure out what's going to happen at the end. Again, Jesus said, it's not for you to know, which is in the hands of the Father. I don't know why people it's the fear factor. I know what it is, the fear factor. So, again, that's part of what we're going to talk about in eschatology. So Daniel's 70 weeks, as you saw, chapter 7 through chapter 12. If you want to go in there, what I gave you was a real synopsis, and it kind of explains some of the text that was used in those chapters. But I encourage you, leave it alone. There's no life in it. Let me say it again. It's nice. You can read it. But there's no life in it that's going to feed you. Right. On the speculation on the people trying to interpret it, but not. Even Daniel did not understand that. And the things he used, the animals, that has to do with what he knew at his time. So God gave it to him based on his understanding of that day and time. We don't have that today. But anyway, let's move on. Let's look at this term called the last days. The last days. Let's look at this for a minute, Jim. Okay, there are several verses here that pertain to the last days. Kathy, you want to read a couple of those verses for me, please?
Genesis 49:1, and Jacob called unto his sons and said, gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. Isaiah 2:2, and it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it.
Micah
4:1, but in the last days it shall come to pass that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established in the top of the mountains, and it shall be exalted above the hills, and people shall flow unto it.
Now you notice that the Isaiah verse and the Micah verse, so Micah is quoting Isaiah when he's writing this. Micah is quoting Isaiah. So it's something that's being paid. Now, Isaiah is a prophet to who?
Israel.
Isaiah is called a major prophet. Micah is called what?
A
minor prophet. So the major prophet spoke and the minor prophet repeated it. But guess what? They both are major and minor to the same song, which is Israel. Go ahead.
Acts 2:17, and it shall come to pass in the last days, saith God, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams.
Now, who's speaking in this? Who's speaking? Anybody tell me who's speaking? Peter. Peter is speaking. Where is he speaking? At Jerusalem at the Passover. Who's Peter speaking to?
The Jews.
The Jews, Israel. And what is Peter quoting? He's quoting a minor prophet. I think it's Micah, if I'm not mistaken. Could be somebody else, but it might be Micah. Let's go on.
1 Timothy 3:1, this know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come. Hebrews 1:2, hath in these last days spoken unto us by his Son, whom he hath appointed heir of all things, and whom also he made the worlds. By whom also he made the world. James 3:5-3, your gold and silver is cankered, and the rest of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. 2 Peter 3:3, knowing this first, that there shall come in these last days scoffers, walking after their own lusts. Luke 21:21-26.
Well, let's pause. Let's go. Let's look at these verses before we read that Luke passage and Matthew passage. Let's talk about these passages with the last days. We saw, Catherine read from Genesis down to 2 Peter. From Genesis to 2 Peter. And they all had the same thing in common. What's that? So last days. So when is the last days? If you're going to be doing eschatology, you surely want to know what last days mean. So when are the last days? If we start in Genesis, and Genesis, Jacob, or Israel, is talking about calling his sons in, telling them what will befall them in the last days. Jacob must have had something that everybody else didn't know about the last days, don't you think? Don't you think Jacob was saying what's going to befall you in the last days? The problem is, when are the last days? I mean, we talking way back in Genesis down to Peter, and Peter wrote that in AD, between AD 55 and AD 63 when he was crucified. So how can it all be the last days? Our understanding of the last days is skewed. Let me give you something the Father gave me when I was in Ghana this past time on a trip. Because, oh my gosh. That's the first time that's happened. So, let me give you something the Father gave me. My students asked, when I was teaching this last graduating class, we were in 2 Timothy, and that term, and Catherine read 2 Timothy, no, she didn't. But in 2 Timothy, they asked me we said something about the last days. So they asked me, how do we know what is the last days? And so I stood up, which I don't normally do in the group because we sit in a circle. So I stood up and walked to the middle of the room. And I said, January 1st this year, I said, what was January 1st of this year? They said 2020. I said, January 1st of 2020 was the last day of that year. So every day after that, January the 2nd, is the last days. January the 3rd is the last days of 2020. There will never be another one. Genesis 1 and 3. And the evening and the morning was the first day. That was the last day. There won't be another one of those. So when we're looking in the Bible, when we read the word the last days, we are talking about something that started in Genesis chapter 1. We will always be in the last days of this generation. Got that, Jenny? It's always the last days. Today is February the 9th. It's the last days. It's the last days of 2020. So when God created in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, it began to be the last days. We will always be in the last days of this creation, of this generation of creation. Let's put it that way. So when you're reading in the last days, people get twisted on, well, what about the last days? You're in the last days. Why? Because everything in creation is absolute. Why, Curtis? Because it's linear. That means as you move along this line, it is the last days, and those days are, well, we want to know what the very last day is. Well, we want to find out what the very last day is. Now, okay, I get that. So I want to know when December 31st at 11:59. I want to know when it's going to happen. Well, if you're following and walking in these days, you know you're in the last days. So I'm going to give you what Jesus told the Jews. Now, Curtis read something in Daniel when it said restoring the kingdom. Peter asked, Lord, when will you restore the kingdom unto Israel? They understood Daniel's prophecy in that. When will you restore the kingdom? We want to get things back going again like we used to be. Jesus said, it is not for you to know what is in the hands of the Father. I'm telling you again, eschatology is a trap door. There's a caveat for this, but we'll get to that when we get to Revelation. So you're in the we're always in the last days. We've been in the last days since creation. One other thing, if I had to put a percentage on it, Curtis, I don't like to do that, but I'm going to do it for my brother's sake. 99% of the things we read today pertain to the last days deal with Israel. So you want to find out something that doesn't deal with you. Your house is falling apart, but you're worrying about the neighbor across the street. You looking at their car and trying to figure out how much gas mileage they get when your tank is empty. So let me help you. Let's move on to Jesus. Now, Jesus had some last days words. It's always the last days. But his words dealt with certain things of the last day. So let's read right quick. Oh, yeah, I got time. Let's read right quick some things from Jesus that everybody takes and twists and makes it for the church. Now, listen. Most believers today take these messages, take these words, and twist it into the rapture. It does not fit. I wish I had something here to do that. The rapture is a round hole. Israel is a square peg. They don't fit. Now, you can take a hammer and beat them in there, but you're going to have little holes that show you it doesn't fit once you get them stuck together. Everybody commingles Israel and the church. So let's see what Jesus had to say about this. So, Catherine, if you would, please read Luke 21, verse 21 to 26.
And let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let them that are in the countries enter thereinto. For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. For there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath unto this people. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive unto all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. And there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken.
That's good. Let's pause with that. Let's just pause. That's a mouthful. Curtis, don't you think people put their track shoes on the run on this one? They put their track shoe. Woo! I got this. I know what he's saying right here. I know what he's saying right here. No, you don't. Who's speaking? Jesus. Who's he speaking to? And what dispensation is he speaking in? Under pre-cross, under the law. What Curtis read is some of that is in this. Now, I use part of this periodical. I use in the last days, men's hearts will fail them for fear of things coming upon the earth. I see that as a universal verse. Why do I see that? Look around you. Look around you. Men's hearts are always failing them for fear of things coming upon the earth. Look, back at the beginning of World War I, everybody thought the end was there because it was a big war. Fear penetrated. Look at World War II. Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor. The United States entered the World War II. Incoming. Last days. Men's hearts failing them for fear of things coming. There should be wars and rumors of wars. We've always had that. Quit trying to figure out something spiritual in the flesh. That's not our concern. Our concern is the gospel. Our concern is sonship. Our concern is letting people know that their deepest need is not figuring out eschatology, but their deepest need is spiritual identity. Curtis told me, and Jeannie confirmed it, that Curtis was talking to someone last week, and he talked to them about pure sonship, pure identity. And they said a person that he had talked to before, because it really had a lot to do more with him than it did with them. But what the person told Jenny is, I understood every word of that. Was Curtis speaking in tongues the first time he talked to him? No, I doubt it. But it wasn't their time to hear. That time was to hear was right now. But that has a lot to do with his maturity and who he is in the realization of sonship. What did the last days and all of this have to do with this person seeing that? Not a blessed thing. Not a blessed thing. What the Father is saying and doing in us is completely new than these things written back in the Old Testament and Jesus bringing them into to now. So let's look at one more passage for Jesus.
Matthew 24?
Yeah, but hold on. Leave it up there, Jim. Just give me a corner, please. Give me a corner. Yeah, thank you. I just need a corner. These things, because we're here now, we are birth sons of God, right, Curtis? We have our deepest need fulfilled in spiritual identity, and we're learning that. We're learning to live from the inside of the bodies we live in, out through that to the spiritual identity we receive by birth. What God is doing on the earth affects us. But what God is doing on the earth with Israel does not pertain to us. You follow that, Kurt? You follow that, Rhonda? It affects us. When the spirit of fear moves on the earth, if you're in your flesh, you're gonna respond to that. Everybody on the planet is attacked by fear every day, but I guarantee you everybody on the planet does not succumb to it every day, especially those of us who are learning who we are in Christ as the Son of God. Okay? So again, it affects us, or I should say what? It impacts us, but it should not affect us like it does the thing he's doing for Israel. And we'll get to that in a second, why it's important. Read the Matthew portion, please, honey.
But of that day and hour knoweth no man.
Oh, wait a minute. No, Jesus didn't say that. Did he just say what I thought he said? Of that day and hour knoweth no man. Pause. Let me have this corner. Don't read any further right now. I'm going to say this. When was this? Back in 1994 94, I think it was 94, 95. There was a dear brother who predicted when the rapture would happen. Right? You remember that? Who was that? You remember? David something or other. It wasn't me. Hey, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. It was another David. Huh? No, it wasn't Hal Lindsey. That was the late great. No, I can't remember the name of the brother, but he had predicted the day and the time that the rapture would take place. Let me tell you something about foolishness of people. I used to tell Catherine, human beings are fickle. This is years and years ago, 17 years ago. I said, human beings are fickle. I couldn't see because I couldn't see clearly, but I knew. I watched people, and people are fickle. They make one decision and fear hits them. They make another one, and they live that way. So this dear brother had figured out the time zones. Now listen, all of his calculations was based on Old Testament verses. Every last one of them was based on some sign that was going on. And guess what? People sold their homes. Listen, people sold their belongings, sitting on the sides of the hills. I mean, people, I don't know if you knew that. Did you guys know that? Harold Camping. That's what it was. Curtis found it out. So if you want to know, right, Harold Camping. He had it figured out when Jesus was going to return. He had even something about the time zones. People sold their stuff, quit their jobs, sitting on the side of hills and things, waiting on the return of the Lord. Guess what? Tick, 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 tock, tick, tock. That hour passed. And those people were still sitting there. Now, we're going to discuss that in a little bit more detail next week and why it wasn't important for them to sell any of that. We're going to discuss that next week in the rapture. And the difference between the rapture and the resurrection. Bitch, that's another thing that we don't understand. The difference between the rapture and the resurrection. But anyway, so Jesus just said here in Matthew 24:36, but the day and the hour knoweth no man. Why is that? Continue reading, Catherine.
Not the angels of heaven, but my Father only.
Oh, my God. Jesus just slapped the angels down, too. Jesus just stuck a fork in your angels. He let the air out of the angels. They don't even know. Guess what? He's telling us something else. He doesn't even know. You know why he doesn't know? Because if he did, we would too. We have the same spirit, remember. The same Father that birthed us, birthed him. And when he says, get your body, not your bride, we'll discuss that later. Get your body, we as the body will respond. Keep going.
But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came, and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be.
Okay. That tells you something. That has nothing to do with the rapture. The end of times. Jesus comes back to the earth to regain his position as the king of Israel. No man's going to know that. There's a lot of stuff. Curtis was reading that in Daniel, right? The end times and chaos, this time of distress. All of that is part of the end times for Jesus coming back to fulfill God's promise to Israel. Now listen, one more thing before we get to this next portion in Revelation. Until the cross, God was dealing with nations. You got it? Until the cross, God was dealing with nations. That included Israel. That's why Jesus came back for who? Jesus came back to who? Israel. He said what? I come for the lost sheep of the house of who? I don't think we, did you get that? Yeah, Pete shaking his head. Did you get that? I come to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. That's a nation. When the cross happened, God stopped dealing with nations and started to deal with who? Individuals. Why? Because this is the time God has set aside or purposed for the birthing of sons. Uniquely, specifically, this is from the resurrection, from the cross, death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, we entered into sonship. Some call that grace. We are in the dispensation of sonship where God is birthing sons by his Spirit to make them a part of the family. Now listen, now that I said that, I'm going to say this. We were never created to be in a relationship with God. We were created to be related to him by birth, and out of that birth and how we're related to him as Father, we have a relationship as sons. So how you're related determines your relationship. My relationship with Curtis is determined by how I'm related to him or anybody else. Look around you. You got friends. How are you related to them? That determines your relationship. So from the cross, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, we've been in a dispensation of sonship, of spiritual identity, of spiritual birth. And that will stay until the rapture. And we go back into Daniel and Isaiah and Jeremiah. Each one of those brothers has some form of prophetic prophecy for the people of Israel. But after the rapture, when the rapture happens, God goes back into his bride, dealing with Israel, the bride, not the body. So let's continue. Well, we're going to go into Revelations. Yes. We're going to look at Revelation. All right, Catherine.
The book of Revelations, the keys to the book of Revelations.
Now, you didn't know this, but Revelation has some keys. Everybody want to find, let me find my keys. How do I get into the book of Revelation? Let me dig out my keys. You want to start your car? You need keys or a button. You want to go into the house? You need keys or a button. But either way you want to look at it, it's an entry point into something. It is an entry point into something. So if you want to read the book out, you don't know how many years. And the Father was very gracious with me years ago because I was one of them young brothers who had a revelation of Christ and I could see in the things, but I was off in the revelations like a dog. I was sniffing around them pages. Oh, yeah, I can see this. And the Father said to me one day, just leave it alone. And he gave me the verse Catherine was about to read. And from that moment on, Revelation had nothing to do with me. Read that for me, please, Catherine. Revelation chapter 1, verse 1 and 2.
The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave unto him to show unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass. And he sent and signified it by his angel unto his servant John.
Stop. This is the revelation of Jesus Christ given unto John. Unless your name is, some of you might have the name of John, but that's not what he's referring to as you. Unto John, who bore record of the word of his servant John, who bore record of the word of God and of the testimony of Jesus Christ and of all things that he saw. Now, read the next verse there, Catherine.
Revelations 1 and 10. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day and heard behind me a great voice as of a trumpet.
Okay, now leave that up for a minute, Jim. Leave it up for a minute. Go back a little bit. I want to see the verse. Yeah, right there. There's two keys in this. Your front door key and your back door key. Let me give you the front door key. This is the revelation of Christ given unto John. So he's saying there's a revelation of a person, but it wasn't given to everybody at the time. It was given unto John. John saw things. The second key, the back door key. I was in the Spirit on the day of the Lord. You will not understand Revelations unless you're in the Spirit. Nobody reads Revelation. Most people read Revelation from an academic or an intellectual point of view. That's it. They figure it out. They want to figure it out. I want to figure out what God's doing. I want to figure out what he's telling me. It says, I was in the Spirit. You will not understand Revelation without that statement. Remember this? I've used it in the past. Curtis used it not too long ago. Matthew 16, Jesus said, who do men say that I am? And they said, some say you're John, some say you're Isaiah, some say this, some say that. Jesus said, who do you say I am? And Peter said, thou art Christ, Son of the living God. And Jesus said, good word, Peter. You don't realize what you're saying. Flesh and blood didn't reveal this to you, but my Father which is in heaven. Then Jesus said, I give unto you the keys to the kingdom. You understand? That should be pretty simple. But it's spiritual. What keys did he give them? He said, I give unto you the keys to the kingdom, that the gates of hell shall not prevail against you. What keys was he referring to? The revelation. The Father's revelation. The Father's revelation. Flesh and blood didn't reveal this to you. So let's go back, Jim. It says, I was in the Spirit on the day of the Lord. John says that's a key to what he saw. Well, when you read what he saw, you don't understand what he saw until it's revealed to you in the Spirit. Why do you get so twisted on these things? Because we're ignorant. We don't want spiritual things. We want to be able to say, I got this. I can figure this out. So let's read the next one, please, Catherine. Yes.
Let me add that most of the things about the book of Revelations are misinterpreted and misunderstood. First, the events of the book are not in chronological order, meaning they did not happen in the order in which John saw them. He did write them in the order in which he saw them, but that was not the order in which they took place. Second, everything John saw had already happened.
Oh, wait a minute. That's a blasphemous statement there.
That means everything he saw had already taken place, or was going to take or come to pass to mankind. But before God, they were finished.
Yes, but these things John saw before God, they were finished. Now, let me say this again. I remember the first time I said this. Everything in the book of Revelations has already happened. Do you know the first time I said that, a brother looked at me and called me a lie? He didn't quite say you're a lie. He just said, I don't believe that. What you're saying is not true. He said, what do you mean? It already happened. He said, brother, this is something that God says is going to happen. I said, think about it. Now, I'm saying something that was revealed. He's giving me something that he understood by his reading. I said, brother, John said I saw. How could he see it if it wasn't already there? It hadn't been manifested to us or to the world or to the people that it was supposed to. But John saw it. And everything in the Bible, in Revelation, is not chronological order. Now, John wrote it in the order he saw it, but some of the things he saw happened in the Spirit before that time that he saw it. So when the Father gave that to me back years and years ago, he gave me this verse. Let's look at this verse, please, Catherine.
Revelations 4, 1 through 2. After this I looked, and behold, a door...
No, you.
Oh, Ecclesiastes 3:15. For which has been is now, and that which is to be has already been, and God requireth that which is past.
What do you mean by that? Leave it up there for a minute, Jim. When he told me Revelation 1 and 1 was the revelation of Jesus Christ given unto John, and I could not understand that reading it from David. So I left it alone. Because that other verse in verse 10 says, when John said, I was in the Spirit, this is what the Father gave. He said to me, before he gave me Ecclesiastes 3:15, just minutes before, seconds before he gave me Ecclesiastes 3:15, he said, don't you understand everything in Revelation John's writing has already happened? I had never heard that before. That was a pure... I mean, I'm going to do it, Jenny. I could not wrap my mind around that whole idea. Everything's already happened. And that's when the Father said to me, he was writing something he saw. But he see it happen in the Spirit. It's happening in the Spirit. So, when this verse came along, he took me to Ecclesiastes 3:15. Listen to this. That which has been is now. Look, that which has been, which means past, is now. That which is to be has already happened. And God requires that which is past. Past to him, not for us. He's already finished his work, so to him, it's something in the past. It might be in the future for us, but for him, it's past. That's why Jesus said, the angels do not understand it because it's in the hands of the Father. Go, let's continue, baby.
In the book of Revelations, the most often used statement by John are the words, I saw. He said it 33 times in 22 chapters.
That's more than once. That's more than one time a chapter. One time per chapter.
And
I saw 33 times.
And 5 more times he used the word shoe.
Well,
I
that's
guess that'd
King
be
James
showed.
for you. Show. The angel said, come, let me show you. Come, let me show you. Come, let me show you. Well, you put that with the 33 times he got, you got almost 40 times that some type of revelation is coming about. This, I'll read, baby. This is a lot of revelations in the Spirit. Okay, go ahead. So I'm gonna give you a few examples of things that are past, present, in the Spirit, but yet not necessarily has come to pass on the earth. Let's look at this first one. Wait a minute, Curtis, you want to read for? Yeah. I'm giving Catherine a break.
Revelation 4, 1 through 12. After this I looked, and behold, a door was opened in heaven, and the first voice which I heard was, as it were of a trumpet talking with me, which said, come up hither, and I will show you thee things which must be hereafter. And immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was set in heaven, and one sat on the throne.
That's good. Now don't go anywhere. Look at what happened. John said there was a door before him, and a voice said, come up hither. So John already said he was in the Spirit, right? He's already in the Spirit when he's seen these things. But he said, come up hither. In other words, come to me. And he showed me things that are hereafter, and immediately I was what? What do you mean by he was already in the Spirit? Paul said it this way. I knew a man in Christ above 15 years, whether 14 years, whether in the body I cannot tell, or out of the body I tell, who was taken unto what? The third heaven. There's another place in the Spirit John is referring to here than where he was initially. He said, come up here, and he was speaking to somebody who was spiritual when he was already in the Spirit. So there's a place in the Spirit that he took him that he wasn't located at before. Somewhere deeper inside what the Father is doing or had done spiritually. Now, you don't get that from your run-of-the-mill everyday Baptist preacher, or your Pentecostal preacher, or your Catholic priest, or your bishop. The Father is showing us something in sonship that had not been opened before. Please hear that. So come up hither means come deeper into that which is spiritual. Okay, thank you, Curtis. Let's go to the next one.
Revelation 7, 3 through 4, saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads.
Pause. What does that mean? Until we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. Now I'm telling you, many believe in Christians in the day that that's the believers. Jenny, you've been told that. I know you have. You've been in Baptist church, so I know what the Baptists preach on there. You've been told that too. Read on, Curtis.
And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel.
Thank you. That had nothing to do with the church. That had nothing to do with you and me as sons. That had to do with who? Israel. I bet you read that 1,000 times, never saw that. I read it 1,000 times, never saw that. They don't tell you that. They can't say that because we're blind if we're looking intellectual and academic at these verses. Go to the next one, Curtis.
Revelation 7, verse 9 through 10. After this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations, and kindreds, and people, and tongues, stood before the throne, and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes, and palms in their hands, and cried with a loud voice, saying, Salvation to our God, which sitteth upon the throne, and unto the Lamb.
Who's speaking? Everybody in the resurrection. I'm going to discuss that a little bit more next week, but this is not the believers. This is not the sons. This is not birth sons of God. Why? Very simple. He is not to us the Lamb. To us, he's our what? What? He's the firstborn among many what? We are heirs of God what? Joint heirs. This has to do with the resurrection. Later on, we'll get to that next week in the rapture. But this has nothing to do with the church. We're still in Israel. And what happens as the humankind, all nations come under the authority of the Lamb. Woo! Watch out. We're going into deep water. Okay, let's go to the next one, Curtis, please.
Revelation 12, 7 through 9, and verses 12 through 13. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him.
Now pause. What does that tell you? When did that happen? When John saw it, or had it already happened? It had already happened. Listen what he said. Cast down where? To the earth. To deceive the whole world. That means after creation. So this has already happened. That's why 1 Corinthians 2 and 7, Paul writes, 2 and 8, Paul writes, had they known, Curtis, what would have happened? They wouldn't have crucified the Lord of glory. Okay, let's move on to 12.
Therefore rejoice, ye inhabitants of the earth and of the sea. For the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child.
I would go into that, but I'm going to leave that one alone for next week. These are a couple of verses. I'm not going to have Curtis read them. But if you want to find out just the first part of this that dealt with the verses above, it says in Isaiah 14, 12 to 15, how art thou fallen, O Lucifer, the son of the morning? For thou art cast down to the ground, which is the earth, which shaketh, which does weaken the nations. I won't go into that. When you get the notes, please read this. Going on up, Jim. Ezekiel 28, another indicator. Thou have been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was upon. In other words, Satan was beautiful. He had great beauty. And it says in verse 14, thou anointed cherub, thou covetest, look, and have set thee so. In other words, God made him who he was. Thou wast upon the mount of God, which I will, if you go back to Isaiah 14, he said, I will exalt myself on the sides of the north, sit on the mountain of God. Thou hast walked in them. You go read this passage in Ezekiel. When you read that, you will find out about Isaiah, which has to do with the fall. Listen, the fall. Jesus said, I beheld Satan fall. Man never fell. Yes, brother. Go back up again, please. Curtis said he missed the verse.
Go back up to the Revelation.
Isaiah?
No, Revelation.
Oh, Revelation?
Yeah, I think I missed a sentence that was kind of critical. Right here. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. And when the dragon saw that he was cast into the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child.
Okay.
Rejoice, heavens, but woe to the earth.
But woe to the earth. That's correct. And Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28 gives us a more specific detail of this action between Lucifer, who became Satan or the devil. Let's go down to the next verse. Revelation 21.
And I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea.
Now, pause. This is something that is going to happen. This is something that hadn't happened yet. This is something that is going to happen. Okay? So John is seeing something. The first three words, and I saw. So that means when it says God finished from his works, that was the truth, because this has not happened yet. So it is deep into the spirit. Come up, and I'm going to show you something. Go ahead, Curtis. Thank you.
And I, John, saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband.
Woo-wee! Oh, this a shake. I'm going to shake some people up with this. Now, you hear what John just said, and I saw. I, John, saw. What did he see? The new Jerusalem coming down from God, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband. Look at verse 9 to 10.
And there came unto me one of the seven angels, which had the seven vials full of the seven last plagues, and talked with me, saying, Come hither, I will show thee the bride.
Wait a minute. He going to do what? Say what? Say what? I'm going to show you the bride. Well, we all been told the church is the bride. Have you not been told the church is the bride, Jenny? Curtis, have you not been told the church was the bride? Pete, have you not been told the church is the bride? Jimmy, the church was the bride? Monica Lopez, the church is the bride? Patricia, the church is the bride? That's what we've been told. We're told. What is the angel? Unless this angel is lying to John, somebody was missing something. What did he say, Curtis?
Come hither, I will show thee the bride, the Lamb's wife.
Whoa! Didn't say anything about the son. It said the Lamb's wife. Who is the Lamb's wife, Curtis? We'll read it.
And he carried me away in the spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me that great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God.
Now, if you continue reading on down, you'll read about the city that was surrounded by gates. 3 gates on the north, 3 gates, and it says all the gates had the name of the 12 apostles on them. You ever read that? Yeah, we read that. But he said, come hither, and he took me into the spirit. There's another spirit term in that. I'm telling you again, unless you're into the spirit and walking in sonship, these things will only be things that people tell you what it means to them in the flesh. Means what it means to them in the flesh, academically and intellectually. Other than that, they're ignorant. Did I just say that? Let me clean it up. They're ignorant spiritually. How about that? Because unless you have somebody tell you, come up here in the spirit, let me show you something, you're not going to get what God's saying in this. because it already has happened. It's already, now this is going to happen. This is Jesus in the gospel saying the bride and the bridegroom. He's talking about himself as the husband. He's talking about Israel as the bride. You read that for years, but did you see it? No. Let's go on, Kurt, please. So, remember. So,
when you're reading the book of Revelation, please keep this in mind. It is for the mind of the Spirit and not the mind of the flesh. Remember, this is of the mystery of sonship, and everything in the Bible is spiritual. In all end of time studies, in all end of time studies, Israel is and should be in focus. The church is not on the same path as Israel. Israel is not who the church should be focused on. Israel is not God's time clock for the church or the rapture of the church, the body of Christ.
Amen. Okay, that's going to conclude with our message today in this portion of this section on Ecclesiastes, on eschatology. I trust the Father next week we'll get into the rapture, which is the last phase of this. I didn't know this was going to I did not have any idea it was going to take this long. I had no idea how much information the Father was going to bring us. But if you want the notes and you listen to this on YouTube and you want the notes, please send us an email giving us your email address, and I'll be glad to send it to you. These are my notes, so you might find a few little tweaks in that might not fit your grammar, but you're welcome to use them. You're welcome. Jim's laughing at me. You're welcome to use them as it is. Beloved, thank you so much for joining us in this week in Sunday Fellowship. And for those of you on Zoom, just hang around till we make the change, and we'll just maybe discuss some of these things as we finish. God bless you guys. Love you. Trust the Father to see you next week.